Pick up your phone right now. Go ahead. Notice how your thumb already knows where to go before your brain even decides. Straight to the same corner of the screen. Same app. Same reflex you've done 1,000 times without thinking about it once. Most people call this a bad habit. Something to work on, like nail biting or procrastination. It's not a habit, not in the way you think. What's actually happening is closer to a chemical negotiation happening inside your skull, one your phone is winning almost every single time. And the mechanism behind it was never an accident. It was built. To understand why, you first need to understand the actual chemical your phone is targeting. Because most people think it's about pleasure. Dopamine gets blamed for feeling good, but that's not really its job. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It fires before the reward, not during it. It's the chemical that makes you check, not the chemical that makes you satisfied once you do. Casinos figured this out decades before smartphones existed. Slot machines aren't built around the moment you win. They're built around the moment right before you find out, that flicker of uncertainty between pulling the lever and seeing the result. Psychologists call this a variable reward schedule, and it's one of the most reliably addictive patterns ever discovered in behavioral science. Same lever, unpredictable payout. Your brain can't stop chasing it. Fixed rewards don't do this nearly as well, which is exactly why casinos never use them. A machine that paid out the same amount every single time would get boring fast, because certainty kills anticipation. And anticipation is the entire chemical hook. It's the unpredictability itself, not the size of the reward, that keeps a gambler pulling the same lever for hours. Behavioral psychologists demonstrated this pattern decades ago in lab animals, long before anyone imagined applying it to a phone. Pigeons pecking a lever for randomly timed food pellets kept pecking far longer and far more compulsively than pigeons who got food every single time. The randomness was the addiction, not the food. Your phone runs on the exact same principle. Pull down to refresh. Maybe there's a message. Maybe there isn't. Maybe the next video is incredible. Maybe it's forgettable. You genuinely don't know until you check, and that not knowing is precisely what keeps your thumb moving. This isn't a metaphor or a loose comparison. Former tech employees who helped design these systems have said so directly in public interviews, using the same language casino designers use. Infinite scroll, variable rewards, intermittent reinforcement. These aren't accidents of good app design. They're deliberate engineering choices, refined through constant testing, aimed at one specific goal, keeping your thumb moving. So here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This wasn't a side effect of building useful apps. It was the design brief. Engagement is the metric that decides which apps survive and which ones die. Not usefulness. Not user well-being. Time on screen. Every notification, every color choice, every autoplay countdown exists because someone tested it against a version without it, and the version that kept people scrolling longer won. Red notification badges aren't red by accident. Testing showed red creates more urgency than blue or gray, so red became the default color across nearly every major platform. Autoplay doesn't wait for your permission because the pause between videos was found to be exactly where people were most likely to put the phone down and stop. Remove the pause, remove the exit. Personalization multiplies all of this by another order of magnitude. Early social platforms showed everyone roughly the same content. Modern recommendation systems don't. They watch every second you linger, every video you rewatch, every post you scroll past a little slower than the rest, and they quietly build a private model of exactly what keeps your specific brain hooked. That model gets more accurate every single day you use the app. You're not fighting a generic algorithm. You're fighting a system trained specifically on you, refined against your own past behavior, with millions of other users' data used to predict what you, individually, are least able to resist. None of this makes phones evil, exactly. It makes them optimized. Optimized for a goal that was never actually your goal. Here's the catch, though, and this is where it gets worse than simple distraction. Research increasingly suggests this isn't just a behavioral pattern you can white-knuckle your way out of. It may be reshaping how your attention itself functions. A widely cited statistic drawn from Microsoft-funded research claimed the average human attention span dropped from around 12 seconds in the year 2000 to roughly 8 seconds by the mid-2010s. That number has been debated and picked apart by researchers ever since, partly because attention span isn't really one single, easily measured thing. Even researchers skeptical of the specific figure agree on something adjacent and better supported. Sustained attention, the ability to focus on one task without needing a new stimulus, does appear measurably harder for heavy phone users to maintain. Some neuroscientists have gone further, studying what constant task switching does to the brain over time. Every time you check a notification mid-task, your brain doesn't instantly return to full focus once you look away. There's a cost, sometimes called attention residue, where part of your cognitive capacity stays stuck on the thing you just interrupted for. Do that dozens of times a day, every day, for years, and you're not just experiencing distraction in the moment. You may be training your brain to expect interruption as the default state, making genuine deep focus feel increasingly unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable when you actually try it. Physical brain structure has even come under examination. A handful of imaging studies have reported differences in gray matter density, particularly in regions tied to impulse control and emotional regulation, when comparing heavy phone users to lighter ones. It's important to be careful here. Correlation isn't causation, and this research is still young, contested, and far from settled science. Nobody can currently prove your phone is definitively rewiring your brain in a permanent, one-way sense. But the fact that credible researchers are even asking the question, using real imaging data, tells you this stopped being just a lifestyle inconvenience a while ago. Large-scale surveys of teenagers have found something equally hard to ignore. Adolescents, who report the heaviest daily screen use, also report higher rates of anxiety and depressive symptoms than lighter users, a pattern that's shown up repeatedly across multiple independent datasets. Researchers are still working out exactly how much of that link is causation versus other overlapping factors, like sleep loss or reduced in-person social time. But the direction of the pattern has been consistent enough, across enough separate studies, that it's no longer treated as a fringe concern inside psychology departments. Meanwhile, the people who understand this system best are behaving in a very specific, very telling way. Multiple former Silicon Valley executives, including people who helped build the platforms in question, have publicly restricted their own children's access to the exact products they helped create. Some have gone on record limiting screen time, far below what most parents allow, or banning certain apps in their homes entirely. When the engineers who understand the mechanism best are the most cautious about exposing their own kids to it, that's not nothing. That's the closest thing to an insider warning most of us will ever get. And the scale of this goes far beyond any one household. Billions of people now carry one of these devices, built on the same principles, refined by the same testing, running for hours every single day across nearly every waking moment of modern life. This isn't a niche problem affecting a small unlucky subset of heavy users. Think about that for a second. It's closer to a low-grade, society-wide experiment running in real time, with a design goal that was never your focus, your sleep, or your mental health. Estimates on average daily phone use vary depending on how they're measured, but most credible surveys land somewhere between 3 and 5 hours a day for the average adult, and considerably higher for teenagers. Multiply that by a lifetime, and you're looking at years of a person's total waking hours spent inside an environment built by someone else's design goals. Sleep researchers have documented how blue light and pre-bed scrolling delay melatonin release, pushing back the body's natural signal to wind down. Anxiety researchers have studied the specific unease that comes from being separated from your phone, a phenomenon now common enough to have its own name, nomophobia, short for no mobile phone phobia. None of these are fringe concerns anymore. They've become mainstream enough that public health officials in several countries have started issuing formal screen time guidance for children, the same way they'd issue guidance around nutrition or sleep. Phantom vibration syndrome adds another strange layer to all of this. Surveys have found that a large majority of regular phone users report feeling their phone buzz or ring when it did neither, a false alarm generated entirely by a nervous system primed to expect interruption at any moment. That's not a coincidence or a quirk. It's what happens when your brain gets trained so thoroughly to anticipate a notification that it starts manufacturing the sensation on its own, checking for a reward that was never actually there. Where does that leave you, sitting there, holding the exact device this entire video has been describing? Not without options. Understanding the mechanism doesn't mean surrendering to it. Once you know a slot machine is a slot machine, you look at it differently. Turning off non-essential notifications removes a huge share of the artificial urgency. Switching your screen to grayscale mode makes the interface measurably less compelling, since a lot of that pull comes from color psychology you now understand. Deleting the apps engineered hardest for engagement and accessing them only through a browser instead adds just enough friction to interrupt the automatic reflex. None of that requires willpower in the way people usually mean it. It requires removing yourself from an environment that was specifically engineered to be irresistible, rather than trying to out-willpower a system built by teams of psychologists and engineers whose entire job was making sure you couldn't. Built-in screen time trackers help too if you actually open them instead of dismissing the weekly notification. Most people underestimate their own daily usage by a significant margin until they see the real number in front of them, and that number alone is often enough to shift behavior. The same way seeing a bill can change spending habits faster than any budgeting advice. Physical distance matters as well. Charging your phone in another room overnight, instead of on the nightstand, removes the single most common trigger for the first and last habitual check of the day, the two moments studies consistently find hardest to break. Worth remembering, none of this means the goal is quitting your phone entirely, and no credible researcher in this space is actually arguing for that. Phones do real, sometimes essential things. The goal is closer to renegotiating the terms. Right now, the terms were written entirely by the other side, tested against millions of users, optimized purely for their metric. Understanding the mechanism is what lets you write a few terms of your own back into that agreement. Pick up your phone again if you want to. Notice the reflex. Notice how automatic it still feels, even now, even after everything you just learned about why. That gap between knowing and still feeling the pull, that's not a personal failure. That's the entire system working exactly as it was designed to.